Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Climate Change Issues and asks, does he expect that climate change will result in an increase in extreme weather events such as floods? And if so, what steps is he taking to prepare for such an increase?
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, yes, but I would caution against assigning a particular flooding event to human-induced climate change, such as the member's statements at the weekend about the Bay of Plenty floods. Extreme weather events have long been part of nature's natural processes, and it is not scientifically robust to assign any particular event to being the result of human-induced climate change. The steps the government is taking to help New Zealand adapt to climate change include publishing the documents Preparing for Coastal Change, published in March 2009, and, quote, Preparing for Future Flooding, published by my ministry in May this year.
Dr Russel Norman.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Does he agree with the World Meteorological Organization and the global insurer Munich Re that the unprecedented level of extreme weather events around the globe is part of a trend that can only be fully explained by climate change?
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, the advice I've sought from Dr David Ratt, who's the head of NIWA and their chief scientist, is that in the New Zealand context there is not sufficient evidence of increased frequency of storm events for it to be assigned to human-induced climate change. However, at a global level, there is a likelihood of the link, albeit the connections between the change in chemical composition of the atmosphere and temperature is stronger than what it is for extreme weather events, because quite simply our record of extreme weather events is not as extensive.
Dr Russel Norman.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Does he believe that there is a vast global conspiracy between the scientific community, the IPCC, the World Meteorological Organization, the insurance industry and NIWA to fake the numbers on climate change, or are such beliefs held by newer members of the executive?
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
No. But however, I would caution sort of extreme statements that have been made by the member that the Bay of Plenty floods was a consequence of climate change is not scientifically robust. And what we do need to do is, when we are presenting the scientific information around climate change, is that we present it in a balanced way, which is exactly the way this government is doing so.
Dr Russel Norman.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Will he provide directions to local government that they must take climate-related weather events into account when drawing up district and regional plans to properly prepare for more floods, more droughts and sea level rise as is expected as a result of climate change?
Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, the very document that was published by the Ministry this year, Preparing for Future Flooding, provides exactly the sort of robust advice that local authorities need for dealing with climate change. I'm interested that the Green member is inviting that we provide direction. I would caution the member, as a practical civil engineer who's done work, for instance, in designing stormwater systems, the level of robustness about the projections for climate change are not sufficiently robust to be able to be used directly in the design of such facilities. They have relevance. That's why we provide guidance. I think that's the responsible approach.
Dr Russel Norman.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Which is the least cost option for New Zealand? Giving local councils the option of planning or not for climate change in an ad hoc way through such guidance documents, or providing direction through a national policy statement on climate change adaptation?
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, my view is that the guidance that we've provided for local authorities in this very document is exactly the sort of practical information that engineers and others working in local authorities need to adapt to climate change. But I would question the member on the idea that somehow some national policy direction around climate change is actually going to assist when there remains quite a lot of uncertainty at a regional level. If I take my own community of Nelson, exactly how the climate is going to be affected in Nelson by climate change does not have a level of definitiveness that would justify a national policy statement.
Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does he agree that, just like leaky buildings, it will be taxpayers and ratepayers who foot the bill if some councils don't plan for climate change and sign off new housing in areas that may become flooded, and in fact the much cheaper option is to provide some clear national direction so that all councils prepare for climate-related extreme weather events?
Speaker,
Dr. Nick Smith.
The government is providing very clear direction to local authorities. That is what is provided for in this very document that this forward-thinking government provided for local authorities in May of this year. That is what is, well, the member interjects that it's guidance. I would stress to the member the idea that there is absolute factual information that would enable you to direct local authorities simply does not exist.
Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister, does he believe that central government should direct local government to take a precautionary approach to the extreme weather events that could result from human-induced climate change or not?
The Honourable Dr. Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, yes I do. And that is why the government has provided the material for, well, the member has seemed to have got carried away with the fact that our document refers to guidance. And the simple fact that the member seems to ignore is that you cannot provide more than guidance. For instance, what NIWA provides are scenarios about what might happen with climate change and the levels of sea in any part of New Zealand. How can you provide definitive direction when that work is based on scenarios?
Question number 8, the Honourable Dave Parker.